This is the second week of the course, and generally we're going to be looking at the topic of mathematical modeling. And in particular, we're going to be looking at some applications in microeconomics that you can use mathematical models for. As an example to follow through on this first lecture, we'll let one numerical quantity that we'll look at be the number of calculators produced by a factory, and the other numerical quantity that we'll look at is the cost of producing these calculators. We're generally, if we have two numerical quantities, we're going to let them be expressed in our mathematical model by two letters, one being x and one being y. Now, the first question we need to ask is, how do we choose which one should be x and which one should be y? So the value of y should depend upon the value of x, and mathematically we can say that by y is a function of x. A couple of other math words that you should know is that x is the independent variable and y is the dependent variable. So when we're making our choice as to which one is y and which one is x, y depends upon x, and x is the variable you have the most direct control over. Now, in the particular example we're working through in this section, time is not one of the two numerical quantities, but in other examples it may be. And if you do have time in an example you're working on, that particular numerical quantity should always be the x variable. Now, we have different ways of denoting the y variable. Sometimes we use the single letter y, and sometimes we use notation that looks like f and then an open parenthesis and an x and then a closed parenthesis, and we read that by saying f of x. Y and f of x are just two different names for the dependent variable. How does y depend upon x? The functional relationship between the two variables can be given by an algebraic equation. So in our calculator factory problem, what we want to do is we want to look at the cost function. Cost function involves two different ideas: fixed costs and variable costs. Fixed costs are fixed costs. They don't change with the quantities of items that you produce. So typical examples of these are pre-production costs like design, marketing, retooling. Could also be the taxes on your property, the rent. All things like that are generally fixed costs. Variable costs are production costs, and they change as you increase the number of units you produce. Usually those are material and labor. So for our particular example, suppose we have fixed costs of $15,000 and a variable cost of $10 per calculator. If we just want to think of how much does it cost for us to produce 1,000 calculators, or how much does it cost to produce 2,000 calculators, we can use the numbers given above and conclude that the costs will be $25,000 and $35,000 respectively. But if we want to make a general algebraic expression, it would be C of x equals the variable cost per unit times x plus the fixed cost. So that's 10x plus 15,000. Now we can then apply that particular equation for x is 3,000 and x is 6,500 and actually compute the costs connected with that.